everyone, and welcome to the Death by Adaptation podcast, a bi-weekly book club where we choose one classic book and compare and contrast it against its cinematic adaptations. I'm your host, Nicolò, Grasso, and I'm joined, as always, by the lovely Ewan Gleadow. How are you doing, Ewan?
Enjoying
I don't know
the
if
wine.
the
audio... Oh, I was going to say, I don't know if you're leaving the audio in, but...
Staying in?
I don't know, maybe it's the taste of the glass. I don't know.
Oh.
It's meant to be very, it's meant to be quite strong, but I can barely smell it. And it just tastes a bit shit. Maybe it's because I'm alternating it with a can of orange, Fanta. That might be why.
Just diluting the taste that way.
I'll have a big swig. Hang on.
Let's see what happens. Is it better? Yeah.
It's the bigger the swig, the better.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I've got to ration it though. After this podcast, I'm ordering a takeaway just to get a bottle of Coke so I can have a few vodkas.
What takeaway are you taking out? I'm
going to get a lovely pizza. I've never had anything other than a pizza for takeaway. Never.
From who? Pizza Hut, Pizza Express,
no,
Domino's?
So I live in the middle of absolutely nowhere, so we've got no good takeaways. The last time I got a takeaway from a place near me, the garlic bread I ordered had a bit of metal in it, which was delicious. Really nice. But I found a new place that's next to the pub we always go to, and their pizza and burgers are... Oh, it's beautiful. It's so good. So I'm going to get myself a nice chicken, peppers, mushrooms.
Ooh.
Nice big bottle of Coca-Cola.
Ooh.
Can't wait. Nice big tub of garlic sauce as well.
I just finished having dinner, but that's making me slightly hungry again.
As you can... the people that are listening can't see, but this is my dinner. This lovely glass of red.
It's very classy. It's very classy.
I need to buy... Oh, God. I need to buy wine glasses for my flat as well, don't I? Just one. I don't entertain people. Just one...
Just a normal glass. You don't need the wine glasses.
Well, to be fair, at uni I used to drink any alcohol out of... I had a Fallout 4 mug that I got from a press release thing. So it had the Vault Boy winking on the front of it.
Oh man. Oh no.
But no, it's I don't know. One glass fits all, doesn't it? You can get wine glasses that are the size of a bottle, so you can pour the whole bottle in and just drink it. But at that point, you may as well just drink it out of the bottle.
So it's going straight to the source. Anyway, 2 weeks ago we talked about the 50 Shades trilogy, which was quite the conversation and quite the combo of just movies and books. But today we're going back to what some people would say are proper classics. We're going back. We're going back to Catch-22.
Look, I'm due for rotation myself in a couple of months if I don't cause any trouble or break any rules. And one of the rules says I can't ground anyone just because he asks me to.
Can you ground somebody who's crazy?
Of course, I have to. There's a rule that says I have to ground anyone who's crazy.
I'm crazy!
Who says so?
Ask anybody. Ask Daily, Doc, McWatt. Hey, tell him.
Tell him what?
Am I crazy?
He's crazy, Doc. He won't fly with me. I take good care of him, but he won't. He's crazy, all right.
That's proof, isn't it? You're damn crazy. They're crazy.
And why do you ground them?
Why don't they ask me to ground them?
Because they're crazy, that's why.
Well, of course they're crazy. I just told you that. You can't let crazy people decide whether you're crazy or not, can you?
He's all crazy.
Of course he is. He has to be crazy to keep flying after all the close calls he's had.
Then why can't you ground him?
I can, but first he has to ask me.
That's all he's got to do to be grounded?
That's all.
And then you can ground him.
No, then I cannot ground him. There's a catch.
A catch?
Sure, Catch-22. Anyone who wants to get out of combat isn't really crazy, so I can't ground him.
Okay, let me see if I got this straight. In order to be grounded, I've got to be crazy. And I must be crazy to keep flying. But if I ask to be grounded, that means I'm not crazy anymore and I have to keep flying.
You've got it. That's Catch-22.
Originally released in 1961, but even though it took 8 years to write, which is a long time to write a novel, Catch-22 is a satirical war fiction story written by Joseph Heller and is considered to be one of the most important and most famous and acclaimed war books of the 20th century. And I have to say, I can totally see why. This bonkers story of a group of soldiers, American GIs, on a small island near the coast of Italy during World War II, part of what happens is taken from Heller's own experience during wartime, but he injects so much into it, so much humor, so much heart, such a strong voice in the way he writes just the entire book. And again, he started writing it in 1953, and it's so complex, and there's so many different layers, and the structure is very interesting, it's very compelling. Where I was reading it and I thought, yes, this deserves to be praised as a proper masterpiece. So I'm curious you on how you feel about this classic book.
More or less the same as you. I really, really love it. I think a lot of it is because it is, it's your traditional classic. When I first got into
Mm,
reading a couple of years ago, it was more or less, Catch-22 was very much up there with stuff like Pride and Prejudice, with stuff like 1984. It's always been synonymous with that label of classic, and it wasn't until I read it that I kind of, you just get the conception of, yeah, it's a classic. You just accept that. You can't really fight against it, and it's once you read it, you realize why, and it's so good. I didn't know it took 8 years to write, but when you think about how complex it is and
mm.
how smart Catch-22 is, and how many characters overlap and how it's flowing so well, and it's just it's magnificent. That is 8 years of hard work. That's really good. Um, and I think as well, the whole classic tag, it helps that Catch-22 actually spawned a logistical argument of actually
Yes.
what a Catch-22 is, which is still, I mean, it doesn't help that I've had a glass of wine, but I still can't get my head around it.
It's tragic. That's the beauty of
Yeah,
the actual Catch-22, because it's funny in the moment, but when you think about it, it's tragic. And for those who don't know, and I'm going to do a absolutely horrible job trying to explain what Catch-22 is. It's basically you're screwed. Whatever you do, whatever you want, you're just screwed. You're in an impossible life and death situation where it's impossible to escape from, because the protagonist of the book, Yossarian, he has to fly. He has to fly bombardiers. Well, that's the name of the
something
planes,
like that.
right?
Yeah,
Like bomber airplanes over like Nazi occupied and fascist cities in Italy, and he doesn't want to do that. And every time he's almost reached this total number of fly missions that he has to do, the colonel just raises them up again. It's like, oh, you have to do 50 missions. Oh, you're almost close to it. Now you have to do 70. Now you have to do 80. And he just keeps moving them up and up and up. And so Yossarian wants to get grounded. He wants to go home. He doesn't want to fly airplanes anymore. And so he asks the local doctor, the military doctor actually, to be grounded. And the doctor's like, I cannot do this. Like, but I'm crazy. I don't want to fly. I'm crazy. It's like, I know you're crazy, but I cannot ground you, because if you want to be grounded because you know you're crazy, then you're not crazy. But only crazy people would actually go fly up in those airplanes to get killed. So whatever you do, I'm still not going to ground you. That's basically Catch-22 in a nutshell. And just the book goes back to this, encapsulates it in so many wonderful ways. And it is honestly insane and beautiful that this ended up becoming a common term. Misused. I was reading up a couple of interviews with Heller himself, who hates how people have misused it over the years. Where sometimes there was an interview where I read where he's talking about, I go out with friends and other people and writers and whatnot, and then they go like, oh, I've had like this Catch-22 situation, and they just smile and nod, and as soon as they start, I'm like, that's nothing to do with a Catch-22. So it's not what it is, just a common annoyance that you can easily fix. That's not what a Catch-22 is. um, but it's, yeah.
it's very smart, and I think the logic behind Catch-22 is the real genius of it. I mean, regardless of how, because let's be fair, the prose and the quality of the writing and the characters are magnificent.
Oh yes.
It all circulates on the logistical issue at the heart of it, is that to be insane is the only way to get out of flying, but to refuse to fly and to say you're insane is a sign of sanity, and then you've got to fly. And I would be hard pressed to offer a different example of that, because it feels like such a specific example, but it's something
Mm,
that is, as you said there, quite commonly misconceived and quite frequently used. And I think it's the sort of the actual the Catch-22 of Catch-22 is the fact that it's so synonymous with a Catch-22 that people are trying to use it as a Catch-22 and realizing that
mm,
it's not a Catch-22. And it's, I read a review of this book on Goodreads, which is always a mistake because
Oh,
the user base of Goodreads is about as bad as Letterboxd. So
well,
someone
we have a
said,
better vocabulary, I'd say.
yeah, that big
That's the
words.
positive.
Any
I
word
would
over
say.
5 letters on Letterboxd is a bannable offense. But it's someone said that one of the issues they have with Catch-22 was the circular notion of the characters. It's always round in circles and circles and circles.
Mm.
It's the repetition of it. But I think that's the beauty of it. I think that's the best part of Catch-22 is that it goes around in these circles, and it's the endless loop, because that is what Catch-22 is. It's the endless loop of trying to break out, thinking you've got a way out, and actually realizing no, that's the exact issue that is sort of prevalent. And it's, I think Heller's writing really sort of prides itself on how much it realizes that. I
Mhm.
think you'd be hard pressed to write another situation that sort of defines a Catch-22 so well. Is that, you know, your Sarian doesn't want to fly. To say you don't want to fly is a sign that you're able to fly, essentially. And it's, you know, we can bang on over and over about what is and is not a Catch-22, but the sort of, you know, the actual book Catch-22, not the logical statement, but the actual writing is superb. It's so grim and sadistic, but it's got such a wry little humor to it. It's so
Mm.
darkly funny. It's, you know, these men are all banged up in a hospital because they're injured or trying to break out of being up in the air. And we'll talk about the movie because it ramps up the comedy without the black humor of it,
Mhm.
but it's still there. And in the book, it's so horrifying. It's so like it really goes for the heart on it, because these are really strong emotive characters, not because they're sort of larger than life or unique, but because they just feel very humanized. They're very, not flat, but they're recognizable. Nobody
Mhm.
wants to go fly in a wall because that might lose your life. That's immediately you can just connect with your Sarah and go, okay, yeah, fair enough. I wouldn't want to do that either.
Yeah, it's a very simple anti-war message that manages to be much much more complicated than the adaptation, which we'll get into later, little bit. But it's what I especially loved reading it. Not only the structure, because it's borderline episodic at times. It just going like in the first like half of the books, like 300, 400 pages, just keeps introducing new characters, and you focus on them. You just understand everyone's personality, and they're very funny, but they never become full on caricatures, full on cartoons, and they're all kind of relatable and understandable in a weird way. And just so much of the humor hits, and it hits hard. And this is actually one of the very, very, very few books that I've actually listened to. I had an audiobook. There's a very fantastic version on YouTube, and I was listening to it, and the narrator did a fantastic job, because I read, I think, like 200 pages of the book before switching to the audiobook version. Incredible, absolutely incredible. It gives a specific voice to all the characters. It brings them to life, and it brings the words to life. And it's exciting, it's fun, and it's dark, but it never wallows into misery. It never takes itself excessively seriously, even though it is very much aware of the seriousness of war. And it works really well when it's trying to be very funny, but there are also more somber moments that still manage to sneak in a laugh or two, but are nonetheless quite powerful. And one of my standout sequences in the book is when they are in a tavern or something in Italy, and talking to some Italian people, and there's like this elderly man, and one of the soldiers is discussing, like talking to him about the war, and they're talking about, and it's like, oh, get ready because the US are going to fall, and but Italy will never fall, because we kind of like accept everything that happens to us. That's knowing the history of my country, that spoke to me very much. It's very true. And and it shows also like the I don't know how to say it, just let's say jingoism, because it's a good word, but like this need of, like, the US is going to conquer everything, and we joined World War II, and we're going to save the day. And that was the mentality that all those soldiers went into the battlefield. And you see that in the younger soldiers of this camp, of this army base. And they're going to lose their lives, and you know it's not going to lead to anything good. And what's very effective is that he started writing it in the 50s, like 1953. I want to say the Korean War had just started, and it was not. I mean, it was a big deal. It wasn't as big of a deal as World War II or as the Vietnam War, which would come a decade after, and just a couple of years after the release of the book was actually published. But you get to the end of the book where it really manages to transcend the message of war is bad, war is dumb, people are stupid for trying to go to war. Yeah, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, it's any book that sort of tries to encapsulate war, any film that does it, any song that does it is always going to be sort of straddled by the the anti-war message, because that's the sort of one it leans towards. And it's if I mean we talked about Paul Verhoeven briefly with Hollow Man a few weeks back. I don't know if that I don't know when that's out actually, but the what I always take away from Starship Troopers, for instance, which is a great book by Robert Heinlein, is war is horrible, and that is you'll never find a pro-war book. I mean, I've read a couple this year. I read All Quiet on the Western Front and A Day in the Life of Ivan Desievich. It's war is quite grim.
Mhm.
There's no escaping that. It's how you showcase that grim feeling, and a lot of it comes down to how violent it is, how disgusting it is, and how gruesome it can be. And Joseph Heller has that. He has that underlining everything. What he has on top of that is the sort of mental fatigue. He has
Mhm.
the horrors of reacting to losing a friend, losing someone that you fought with just a day ago. It's and it does feel personal. It's really horrifying, and it's also got the benefit of releasing just right at the right time. You know,
Yes.
like you said, I think it was the Korean War started in 1950 and like 53. People were still like shell shocked by that, even in the 60s, because in the 1960s you had I don't mean to use my A level in history here, but I believe it was the early 1960s where you're coming up to JFK's presidency, you're coming
Mhm.
up to the Cuban Missile Crisis, you're coming up to the Bay of Pigs. Before that, you do have the sort of embers of the Vietnam War when France was essentially pushed out of their colonies there. It's all of this is going on, and while it doesn't directly involve America just yet, when Catch-22 was released in '61, people still remember the Vietnam War. Sorry, the Korean War, and they
Korean.
still remember World War II as well. So it's right at that crux of this is a book reflecting on two previous wars, but as it's gone on, because this wasn't a real big seller until it released on paperback, is that by the time it got to that point, my God, it was a reflection on the Vietnam War that was about to begin, and it's such a perfect little time for it to release, because it essentially covers war in as a large dark comedy,
Mhm.
and it's the best thing about that sort of thing is that while Catch-22 does have a setting, it does have its place in a historical context. It does feel quite timeless in the sense of this can be applied to a lot of other warfare books and a lot of warfare films. It's like it has such a dark underscore to it, but it still has that, like, not beauty, but it has the beauty of being very focused on what it wants to say. And doing that is so difficult when you think about the amount of books out there that do talk of war and how it can be misinterpreted and how it can just sort of channel off different emotions of negativity. Catch-22 is so focused on people want to get out of this so clearly, so particularly, and everybody is just you think of a character like Major, the bless his heart, because he's just spat on and shot down and just stomped on the whole way through. And you look at that, and it's not that we feel sorry for him; it's that we feel anger towards those that have put him in that position, because really he's not done anything.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and it's the same for Yossarian. He's just a man with his senses about him. He doesn't want to fight a war that he's not particularly keen on, and he's punished for it. And it's I feel like that's pretty particular for a lot of war books, where it's people are fighting a war that isn't their fight. But I think Catch-22 is one of the few that's actively thinking of the horrors and thinking of what they're trying to avoid, and it always keeps that at the forefront. It's if Yossarian doesn't ignore this or try and get out of it, then this will happen. And he uses other characters as examples of what could happen, like Snowden, like Major. It's just he's either going to blow up in some horrible atmosphere, or he's going to be stomped down by people that are trying to convince him that he's doing the wrong thing, yet are rewarding him for doing that by the end of the book.
Yeah.
And it's shown really well in the adaptation with Alan Arkin, and I think that's one of the strongest scenes is the initial flight when Yossarian's on board, and he's just so shell shocked by it all, and he's screaming and he's like crying out and he's wounded,
Pure
and the
panic.
people around him, and that's the humor of it. The people around him are just going, "Ah, you're all right, pal. Don't worry about it." And then it just cuts, and it's a white room, and it's the white backdrop on the plane, and it's so good. It's so good. Um, it's one of the few adaptations where I've watched it and thought this actually adds to what the book is saying. It adds something different, but it also adds something new. It's so just what a film and what a book. Honestly, I'd argue it's one of the few war novels to actually truthfully capture the emotions of a soldier.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's go into the film. Let's go into it. Catch-22, the movie, was released in 1970. To be precise, around like the end of May, beginning of June 1970. Directed by none other than Mike Nichols, whose previous two movies were Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and The Graduate. They are some of the finest movies of the 60s. And Catch-22, the production of this was hell. This was a shoot that was supposed to be relatively short and relatively quick. It took quite a few months to complete. There were a lot of problems. And if you're interested, there's like loads of trivia you can find online. One of the funniest parts to me is that Paul Simon is in the film, and he was supposed to go back to New York to record Bridge Over Troubled Water and the whole album with Garfunkel, and he was unable to leave the movie. And Garfunkel was so upset that he wrote "The Only Living Boy in New York." I was just like, oh, bless him. He has a line about like that's referencing Paul Simon, like, oh, you can leave the movie and come back here, or something like that. Like that one's gonna miss you.
I love it's got nothing to do with Catch-22, but I love the hate between Simon and Garfunkel. It's phenomenal. It was one of them. I think it was Garfunkel said, "Oh, I'd love for us to do another reunion tour," and the day after, Simon turned around and said, "Oh, I've retired." Just oh, it's fantastic the way they hate
What
each
a
other.
coincidence! What a coincidence!
I mean, phenomenal musicians. I mean, Paul Simon sort of had a stint in the 70s where he was showing up in movies for no reason, really. Surprisingly, him and Garfunkel are quite good actors.
Yeah.
I mean, Garfunkel in this is bloody Captain Nately, just great. I mean, I suppose it helps. You know, a lot of musicians go into films and they're actually all right. I think Garfunkel, particularly though, he's got a lot of heavy hitting films under his belt. You know, he did Carnal Knowledge and he did Bad Timing, and that's a pretty good track record. But I think if you look at the rest of the cast, that's just you cannot compete with that quality. And I suppose that's the issue of Catch-22's film. There is that much quality there that you're expecting quality elsewhere. When Orson Welles shows up in your film, you have to adapt to that.
Yeah, let's just read like some of the names of the cast. You have Alan Arkin, Martin Balsam, Richard Benjamin, Art Garfunkel, and just side note, I said Paul Simon for some reason. It's Garfunkel. I mean, I just switched the names anyway.
The best way to remember it is Paul Simon did "You Can Call Me Al" with Chevy Chase, and Art Garfunkel did not.
He did Catch-22.
He did. He did. Yeah, because it was Paul Simon. Paul Simon was in Annie Hall.
He was, yes. Yeah. Oh man. You have Jack Guilford. Other films. You have Martin Sheen, very young. Anthony Perkins, John Voight, also very young. Post Midnight Cowboy, and Orson Welles, Bob Balaban. It's a banger cast for 1970. This was a big project. Like they championed this script. They were moving it around. Like everyone wanted to make it. Even Orson Welles himself wanted to direct this, which honestly might have been brilliant. Very, very different from this one, but brilliant, because Orson Welles in the 60s and 70s, it was on fire. But it's a massive movie, and you're watching it, and the scope is almost overwhelming at times. This is really well made. Mike Nichols is a great director. There's no two ways about it. There are some complicated ass shots in this.
Oh
You
yeah,
have like airplanes taking off with characters talking, and then they move to another location where they keep talking, and the planes are moving around, and just that's days of work. Like if you fuck
yeah,
up the shot, you have to reset everything. It's like you get one or two chances to remake it, and then that's it. Um, and it's massive. It's a massive production. It's a massive undertaking. And you said you really liked the movie. You loved it
yeah.
actually, and it added to the film, to the novel. I actually have to say I wasn't the biggest fan of this.
No. Oh,
I
what
was
about it?
I was very much into it at first,
Yeah,
but then I just gradually lost
yeah,
interest. And that's the thing. Watching, like reading the novel, it's very consistent with the tone. How it's balancing everything. It's moving from character back and forth. And I'm watching this film, and it's trying a bit too hard to be funny. Or
yeah,
like, it's taking something that's very funny, very dark, and they're almost making it cartoonish in some parts. And I was thinking about like, what are some of my favorite scenes from the movie? I was like, oh, they're all scenes from the book. That they take straight out. I was like, yeah, there's like the moment where he has to pretend to be a dead soldier simply because his parents can actually say goodbye to someone, which is
yeah,
very fun. I was like, oh no, that's almost beat for beat the scene from the book, just put into the movie. And the technical expertise and everything around it is marvelous. Cinematography is sharp. You mentioned when they're up in the air in the airplanes themselves, where it's all like the white background of the clouds and the clean sky. It's great, but then I think that's the problem of taking a book that's over 600 pages long and making a 200 no, a 2 hour feature.
a 200
So
hour
I was like,
feature.
that's a
Oh
lot.
god.
That's it's not even the mini series, Jesus. And trying to make it into a 2 hour feature.
Yeah,
It's who's the screenwriter? I forgot.
it's
Buck Henry, who is also in the film.
yeah,
Funnily enough, he's done some great films. I mean, he's written The Graduate. So it's a great script, but it was probably just too much.
yeah.
And I don't know if it's alright for you. I'd like to read a small passage from one of my Bibles,
Oh,
which is Easy
oh
Riders
yes,
Raging
yeah.
Bulls, which I think you've read, right? No, yes,
No, you recommended it to me, and I went out to buy a copy, and it was out of stock.
it's
I'm
so
actually,
good.
I'm going to check now though. Easy Rider, Rich.
There's this passage in chapter 3, which is early on in the book.
Oh, it's on sale.
Take it, take it. And just bear with me, everyone. But just I think this needs to be read because it encapsulates what I feel about the movie. In the final throes of post production on this eagerly awaited new picture, Catch-22, Mike Nichols and his producer John Calley decided to check out the competition. A picture Robert Altman had just finished that sounded a bit like their own. The two men sank into the plush seats of the screening room. That MASH represented a serious threat to Catch-22 was the furthest thing from their minds. Nichols, after all, coming off Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and The Graduate, was America's hottest director. Right away, however, Nichols got a tight feeling in his chest as Altman's darkly comic vision played out in front of him, recognizing that he had been blindsided. We were waylaid by MASH, which was much fresher and more alive, improvisational and funnier than Catch-22, he says. It just cut us off the knees. So it came as no surprise to Nichols that MASH became a huge hit. Nor to Altman either, who was acutely aware that he was chasing Nichols' tail. He had a banner up in his office that said, Caught 22. So, I watched this, I was like, let me just rewatch MASH. I haven't seen MASH in like 3 years, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I liked it when I watched it like 2019, I believe, early 2019. And so I rewatched it. I was like, Jesus, he's right. MASH is so much better than the movie Catch 22. They are very different, and actually, MASH is a book. Like it's an adaptation. I didn't know that.
Oh,
I read up into it, and basically, the book MASH is a semi-autobiographical, fictional retelling of the author's days during the Korean War as part of like surgery, like a surgeon group during the war, during the conflict. And so the book is not very funny, and the book is not very liberal, and it's not very anti-war. And so Altman just took it as inspiration, just made his own thing. And I was watching MASH. I was like, MASH is actually funny. MASH is actually consistent, but MASH is also less cinematic.
Yes.
And it's just Catch-22. You're watching it, it's like, this is a damn movie. You also have proper movie stars who were known at the time, while MASH had mainly unknowns in the cast for that era. It's like Elliot Gould, Donald Sutherland. Like, they hadn't made any big movie up until then. I think though Sutherland was in the Dirty Dozen, if I'm not mistaken.
I
Probably was.
think so.
Um, but anyway, there was just something. It's an interesting comparison between the two, because even like book and film of both versions, it's fascinating. But yeah, have you seen Mash? I think so.
Yeah,
Right?
I
Yeah.
watched MASH. I think like late last year. I
Mm,
watched MASH, and it was really good. I think I prefer Catch-22 over MASH,
mm.
the movies. Um, I'm not sure why. I think it just pops more visually because it's Mike Nichols. Do you know the story about Robert Altman, what he wrote when he decided to take MASH?
Go for it.
Um, apparently, so this is a quick story from Robert Reed Altman. My mum's got
Mm.
had a desk and it had a piece of glass on it. Under the glass was a little piece of paper with my dad's writing on it. I said, "What's this?" And she said, "That's from when your dad decided that he would make the movie MASH." The note said, "Oh fuck it, I'll do it," which just summarizes quite a lot of how Robert Altman works. It was, yeah, I guess I'll do that. Fine.
What a
Um,
legend.
no, I really do like MASH because you've got Donald Sutherland and Elliot Gould in the early 70s, which is magnificent. I think a lot of Catch-22, especially because I'd watched MASH like fairly recently before it,
Mm.
it is very much a, oh yeah, this is no wonder. Like, I mean, Catch-22 performed it. It made a profit nowhere close to what it should have done. Because if MASH hadn't come out, it would have done a lot better. It would have received far more positivity. But MASH blew
Yes.
it out of the water, and kind of rightly so. I understand why people prefer it. I think the soft spot I've got is for how much I like the text and how sort
Hmm.
of how much leeway I was willing to give an adaptation of the text, because it's you are right, it does drift a bit towards the end and it changes things here or there, but I can never get away from the sort of scope of it when you've got John Voight in the car going along the airfield and you see the plane in the background and the camera's slowly panning and then the plane explodes, and it's the lack of reaction to that that's so good. It's the fact that he just wants to talk about supply trades with other bases, and it's like, oh well, we can get some soup from here, and an explosion goes off, and he's like,
That massive
and then we can
scam.
get buns from over here. It's fantastic, and it's I really like that because there are a couple moments throughout MASH that are sort of not MASH, sorry, throughout Catch-22 that are
Hmm.
just quite beyond the pale of what is expected and what is real. It's when Orson Welles shows up and the men are all in the meeting and a woman shows up and they all throw their chairs at her. It's like, take my seat. It's like, it's surreal almost. It's got a nice not edge to it because it's particularly friendly. Nothing untoward happens in that scene. They're just like trying their best not to look at her because they're isolated on a military base with loads of men. And it's the impact is more they're sexually frustrated, but they're also
Mm.
frustrated by everything else on that base because they're just so I'd be frustrated on that base because
Oh
I'm
yeah.
essentially being sent to my death every day, which is a bit of a nightmare. But they seem to handle it well. I can't remember the guy that plays him, but he's essentially the guy in the cockpit with Yossarian who's going, "You're doing a great job, buddy." And Yossarian is essentially yelling, "Please let me out. I'm going to die. I've been hit." And it's like, chin up, lad. You'll be fine. And it's the sort of Yossarian is very much. It's the book as well. Yossarian is made out to be an insane character when he's the only sane one there. I
Mm.
mean, even the people that don't want to fly are nutters. They're mad. Like the ones that are also laid up in the hospital have their own little strange foibles. They're all a bit off their rocker, and I suppose that's more because either they've also realised that they'll die there, or because they're just unhinged and that this is their way of coping. And I think it's the book does a far better job at looking into that than the film, which is more or less just playing it up for comedy, which is fine, but it loses that edge to it. It loses the undertone of this is really quite drastic for the mental sort of sanctions of these people. They're absolutely crackers.
Yeah, they're going insane. Poor guys, all of them. Um, it's a strong cast. I think like Alan Arkin, I like a lot, And I was watching his performance, and that's kind of when I started to shift the way I was approaching the movie, where I tried to take it more as its own thing. Because even then, the performance, it's Yossarian, but it's a bit much. He's always on edge in a way that's, I don't know. In the book, he seemed a bit more. I don't want to say calculated, but a bit more focused. I mean, like, I'm gonna do my best to leave this space, and just, I'm not crazy. I want to leave. I mean, while Alan Arkin is just losing his goddamn mind, just like, come on, just going, just, oh man, chill out, just relax, take a breather, calm down a little bit. Um, he's great though. That's the thing. I really enjoyed him. I don't. I will say this. I think all the actors do a good job portraying the characters, even though I don't feel only two actors to me actually elevate the characters, the roles. We mentioned Orson Welles because Orson Welles, just his presence as General Gleadow, he just comes on screen, and it's one of those. It's basically a cameo, glorified cameo in this film, but
Yeah.
it's so good
I think
because it's Orson Welles. They know
it's
what they
Orson
were going
Welles, yeah,
for.
exactly. I mean, if you think about sort of, he kind of eased into cameos quite a lot. He did the Muppets movie. He did he did cameos sort of, didn't he? I
Well,
mean, he was in A Man for All Seasons quite briefly. He was in
same,
Transformers
yeah.
and Casino Royale and stuff. I mean, he was in Moby Dick for a. I mean, he was. I mean, well, he played Father Mapple in Moby Dick, didn't he? He was in that for a little bit. He was taking essentially these little roles to fund his movies. So Catch-22 was probably responsible for F for Fake, I suppose.
Poor guy. He had a horrible, horrible time back in the
He
day.
was shafted by Hollywood.
He
That's a
really
real
was.
Catch-22.
He was stuck in it.
Yeah.
Just the documentary on making The Other Side of the Wind, I think it's one of my favorite film documentaries, where you see him almost begging people in Hollywood to give him money. Oh, heartbreaking. Anyway,
It's awful.
and I like recently I've been doing. I'm almost done with it. I've been doing like a full retrospective on Pier Paolo Pasolini, the Italian director, and there's a
Yeah.
short film that he made where there's Orson Welles playing a director. And when he came on screen, I was like, "What? Why are you here?" I don't know, but I'm happy. My heart's sore. I was like, "Yes, Wells in a Pasolini film. How did this happen? I don't know. It's wonderful." But anyway, he really believed in those projects, I guess. But the other actor, probably my favorite performance in the entire film, and I wish there was more of him. Anthony Perkins.
Oh,
Anthony Perkins as the Chaplain Tapman.
yeah.
So good. He's so good. He's the only one where, through his mannerisms and the way he acted, not only was he like the character in the book, but he felt like there was more to him. To the point where he comes on screen relatively early on, when like talking to Yossarian, where he's wounded. And then he doesn't come back pretty much at all up until the end. He just pops up and like, yes, finally he's back. My boy is back. Yes, I probably sound more negative than I mean to be about this film. I really liked it. It was a very pleasant watch.
Yeah. I think that the big issue, and this is for a lot of novelizations that we look at, the effect of a novelization is essentially gutting a book to its core elements and its best bits. Essentially, it's like a B-roll footage of the bits that the book was trying to show.
Yeah.
And I think Catch-22 is fairly successful. What I do kind of, I don't know, it's always a controversial one where it's these characters are experiencing other characters' experiences. So you've got a core list of characters. Some are left out, some stories are dropped, but they're still experiencing the effects of those stories, even though they're not in. It implies a lot of reading up before an audience goes in, and I love and hate that. I think it's lovely that people who've read the book are going to appreciate it, and it doesn't lose people that haven't read it, because people don't read anymore. We're essentially pissing into the wind with this, but
it's for niche audiences.
It's a niche audience of people who read
and
but
also
no,
watch movies. So it's like, oh man, we can do both.
It's one or the other, surely. Yes. This is where I reveal I've not actually read the book or seen the film. I don't do either.
It's like, you're going to go to Wikipedia and just Catch-22 novels.
Yeah. It's what is a Catch-22? How do you spell catch? But no, it's one of the things I do kind of love and hate about that film is the leeway it takes with a lot of the characters. I think because of how strange the book is, and I don't think we talked about it yet, but the structure of that book is very delicate.
Yes.
You can't adapt that. It's impossible. I'm sorry, but there's no way of doing it. And I suppose that the next best thing is to sort of say, all right, well, we've got these moments here that can connect together. If we
Mhm.
ditch this and we sort that and we scrap that, I understand that point of view because I imagine it's very difficult to adapt a book, let alone one this sort of not confusing but very complex. It's all layered and it's tangled together like a big nest of wires. To even go about looking at it is a bit difficult and a bit daunting. And I think that's why I can appreciate Mike Nichols' efforts here. It's essentially the best you'll get because I know George Clooney did a mini series of it and that wasn't too well received. Um,
Yeah, I remember that coming out, and I was tempted to watch it, but then I was like, I just don't like George Clooney as a director, so I don't want to do
oh,
it.
did he direct it?
I
Fantastic.
I want to say he did. I might be wrong. I thought
Yeah,
that's what he did.
George Clooney directed a couple of the episodes. He
Very
directed
good.
the fourth episode and the last one.
One thing I forgot is that Christopher Abbott is playing Yossarian, and I don't know about you, Christopher Abbott has become one of my favorite working actors today. On a small level still,
Yeah,
because he's kind of a seal of quality. There are so many times where I've watched and I was like, this was fucking good, and Christopher Abbott is in it. Therefore, Christopher Abbott can do no wrong. And so seeing that he's in Catch-22, I was like, maybe I should give it a shot. Maybe I should give it a
yeah.
shot. I don't know.
I mean, he was in Possessor. He was in what do you call it? Vox Lux.
Vox Lux, The World to Come. Black
He's
Bear.
mm,
Woo! Whoa, man.
he's got a
Jeez.
good track record behind him for someone
Yes.
that
And that's
hasn't.
just 2020. That's 1 year of work. I mean, it's a good guy. Good guy.
I suppose it's regardless of who else you cast, it's not Alan Arkin as John Yossarian because I mean
No.
what a guy! I didn't realize he's 87. Like so old. Not old as in oh my god he's so old. That's disgusting. But as in the guy has been in so much, and it was when I was watching this I was like all right what else has he been? He did The In-Laws. He did Glengarry Glen Ross. He did Argo. He did Little Miss Sunshine. It's like what?
It's Santa Claus 3. The
The
Escape
Santa Claus
Clause.
3 going in style. Zach Braff's finest hour.
I think this
I'm.
is like the second earliest performance that I've seen
It's
from
one
him.
of the earliest ones for me as
Wait
well.
Until
Yeah.
Dark. Wait Until Dark is the earliest that I've seen. If
Yeah.
you
This is
haven't,
the earliest one for me.
yeah. Honestly, both to you, Ewan, and our audience, just go watch Wait Until Dark with
Is that
Audrey
the
Hepburn.
Yeah, the Audrey Hepburn one. Yeah.
So good. It's like Don't Breathe, but actually really great.
Oh, good. Because Don't Breathe.
It's quality. It's quality. It's quality cinema.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it's like I feel like I've mentioned it on either this podcast or Uncut Gems before that a lot of adaptations of books kind of depend on their cast.
Mhm.
Like it's not because they were big at the time, but because they took a risk on those characters. Alan Arkin was not the great name he is now at the time, but when new audiences discover it, they're more inclined to see it because, oh my god, Alan Arkin's in it, Martin Sheen's in it, Orson Welles is in it. It's the power of the name. It's the star power, and it definitely helps with Catch-22, and
Mhm.
the Mike Nichols one. I don't know if it'll have that same effect with the George Clooney one because even George Clooney is a huge name. He's a brand essentially. He slaps his name on a coffee that you go and see at the cinema before the film starts, and that's it. He sold 3 billion
What
bloody
else?
Tassimo pods, but it's it. I'd like to reiterate, I've still got those 80 milk pods that
Jeez.
need to go.
No, they're never gonna go away. They can be part of the furniture, honestly.
They expire on the 10th of October, so I can use them as like I don't know. I might drink one as a test. I don't think you're meant to drink them on their own. But George Clooney is like he's whatever he puts his name on, you'd think people are going to see that. But you look at the track record for what he's directed, especially Catch-22, which I didn't realize it existed until this podcast recording. He doesn't have the draw he does as an actor, and I'm on the fence about his direction I don't think he's a very good director. I thought Good Night and Good Luck was okay. I thought The Ides of March was okay. I thought Suburbicon was dreadful, and The Tender Bar,
Yes.
God rest his soul. But I
That
don't
Tender
think
Bar
much
is
of him.
not a real movie.
No,
I know it
it's
came out and people are watching, but it's not real. Like, no one cares.
it's the exact
That's the
sort of
thing.
mundane degeneracy that you expect from George Clooney, because
Mm.
it's every time he tries to make a film, it's this one's the Oscar, George. You can do it, and then it turns out he's so overwhelmed by the prospect of winning an Academy Award again that he just drops out. I can't mention George Clooney without saying that I don't particularly like him as an actor either. I think Oh Brother Where Art Thou is probably his best work, and he's aided
Yeah.
incredibly by John Goodman and Tim Blake Nelson in that. But I can't get away with the guy. I think he's okay in Ocean's 11. Uh,
No,
uh,
I like him in
Batman and Robin.
no, God, no. No, the oh wait, okay, no. From Dusk Till Dawn,
Oh yes, okay, from Dusk Till Dawn. Fair
because
enough, yeah.
again, more pretty faced actors should play villainous kind of roles, even though he's
Yes.
more of an anti-hero in that one, but whatever. And also, speaking of the Coens, it's not Eternal Sun. Wait, okay, I think Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It's not. Why? Oh my God,
It's
Brad
not
Pitt as
Hill.
well.
No, not Hills. Oh, Burn After Reading.
Burn After Reading. Burn
Yeah.
After Reading.
I need to
Yes.
rewatch that
Yes.
because I watched it when I was very young and I don't think I understood it. I kind of watched it because of the Brad Pitt meme.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I saw small tangent. I saw Burn After Reading when it came out. It was like 2007, 2008. I was like 10 years old, 11. I didn't like it. Me and my family just didn't like it because it was a very offbeat comedy, especially for the time. Like my taste was a bit weird. I rewatched it doing a small mini retro during the pandemic with my flatmates. Holy shit, it's so funny.
Yeah.
It's like it's properly hilarious. I was like, oh, I should have rewatched this way sooner. It's actually really good. It's actually really, really good.
You've convinced me to rewatch it. It's in that big pile by me that needs to get moved, so
It's
I've got to
worth
watch
it.
it at some point.
Yes, yes.
I mean, again, it's another one where the cast is so good for that. I can remember seeing J.K. Simmons, Frances McDormand, Brad Pitt, George Clooney. They're huge names, and
yeah.
I think the ratio for quality and quantity with George Clooney is strange. You know, I might try and see if I can find Catch-22. I think it's on Channel 4's iPlayer thing.
Yes, it is a Channel 4 production, which is
Which is just bizarre. You know,
yeah.
big hotshot American actor going to Channel 4 that are best known for like Peep Show and Father Ted to do an adaptation of a Joseph Heller novel that was probably watched by about 8 people.
Yes, I don't know a single person that's seen it, and I can honestly, like you mentioned, him being like looking for awards and stuff. I can see him like this is the one. This is my magnum opus.
Yeah.
I'm an acclaimed director making a TV show, miniseries, limited, whatever. It's like it's guaranteed to win something. Like I don't know, Emmys, nothing. It's like no one cared.
By the looks of it, the ratings on Letterboxd 3.8 out of 5, but I don't really rate Letterboxd users. But it's got Kyle Chandler in it as Colonel Cathcart, so that could be pretty good.
I love Kyle Chandler as well.
Kyle
Shit.
Chandler, what a guy! He's the perfect John Yossarian. You need Kyle Chandler as John Yossarian.
Christopher Abbott looks weird. I was looking at some of the screenshots. He looks so weird.
He does, yeah.
I don't know what they did to his face. It looks like bleached. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, just I'm honestly thankful and really really happy that I had to read Catch-22 for this because it was honestly a revelation.
Yeah.
And even watching the film, it's very good. I'm not
Yeah.
as big a fan of it as you are, but it's
No, I mean,
I'm happy I've seen that as well.
I think I kind of have a soft spot for sort of very well observed war films, like regardless of the setting or the conquest of the characters. It's going to sound weird, but it reminded me of the start of Patton, where it's very dusty and it's very like broken down and everything's just a bit strewn all over the place. It's not because Patton does that well, but it's because I always find that breakdown synonymous with the characters and the war that they're in. I don't think it helps that the opening of Catch-22 is that he's stabbed by a woman out of the blue, and that's how he ends up like on this journey.
It's
So
a
I
weird
think-
structure, yeah, the flashbacks as well.
It's understandable because the structure of the book is difficult. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier when we talked about the structure. He doesn't do the best job of it. Mike Nichols. I think he does well to make sure that all the characters are there and they're hitting the right beats, but the actual sort of the blur of those characters doesn't quite make sense. I think he does well because it's for the sake of the comedy. Fine,
Mhm.
fair enough. I understand that. I just think it's rather difficult when he tries to change the tone. I think it only works in one or
Yes.
two instances, like the aforementioned the white and the plane wreckage in the white background.
Hmm.
The guy's injured on the ground who's tending to him. I think that's the best scene in a film that I like. That is one of the best scenes in a film I've seen in a long time, and I think it's mainly because of the gradients and the coloring of that scene. It's just the pure white because this is meant to be his imagination, but it's also because he's just terror struck. He's blacked out essentially, and he's imagining all this because that dying guy's a reflection of what will happen to him. And it's really touching and it's really strong. It's just a shame nothing else after that comes even close to what Nichols managed in that one scene, because the rest of it is John Voight and Martin Sheen popping up every now and then.
There's so much John Voight. They
I
they
think
turned him
it's
into a proper fascist. They changed the character up quite a bit from the book.
yeah. I think
Um,
it's probably like, I mean, John Voight is an actor so different to who he plays in this film. Like it's such a not an optimistic performance from him, but so different to what he's
it's very
usually
upbeat.
portrayed as. Yeah, very upbeat, very positive, very kind of like optimistic hick dumbness. Like, oh yeah, and then we can just go here, sir. He's like a kiss ass, but
It's like Midnight Cowboy if you went to war.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll say this about the adaptation just to close things off. Um, I respect what Nichols did because it. I mean, this is kind of a catch-22 if you want.
Oh
Heller would
no,
kill me for saying it, but it was damned if he changed the prose, like, oh,
yeah,
it's straight away from the novel and it's so tight and specific, blah blah. Okay, then he went in a more reverential approach, of kind of like literally taking dialogue out of the book, changing the dialogue up so that or changing the narration up so that it's more like the dialogue in parts. And I mean, bless him, they tried. They tried. I think it was waving it a little bit better, maybe being a bit more focused as well, because they try to make it more about Yossarian, which is the right way to go about it. Because if you just start focusing about like, oh, the guy thinks like everyone thinks is Henry Fonda, like you cannot show that in the movie, you'd never be able to. But all the other things, it's you know, they did what they could,
yeah.
and it's really well made, just impressive on a purely technical level, just
If
impressive.
if anything, it's convinced me to go and read other Joseph Heller books, because
Yeah.
the guy had such a fascinating way of writing. He wouldn't write the book until he had the first line and the last line in his head of what he wanted to say,
Hmm.
and then he would write. He would write down the first line, he would write down the last line, and then work in between like he was filling a sandwich essentially. But I mean, he wrote Catch-22, and then after that, he was like, "Oh wow, this is the fame, the money." He just went back to teaching. He cracked on. It reminds me of Hugh Grant in The Rewrite. He writes an Oscar-winning screenplay and just goes back to like some random university. Um, I really want to read Portrait of an Artist as an Old Man, mainly because I read James Joyce's Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man and was brought to tears. But also, I
That's
mean, it's a
choice
very
for
good
you.
book, but it's a classic. You can't knock it, otherwise you'll be shot. But also because it's a fiction, but it's very reflective and very obviously a semi-autobiographical piece of. It's about an old writer trying to reclaim his glory days by writing the next big book, and Heller died before he did that. It was published posthumously.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, you look at his sort of the novels he did afterwards. He did Something Happen and Good as Gold, but that was like 10, 15 years after Catch-22, and in the meantime, he just lectured. He wrote screenplays. He was uncredited as writing that awful Casino Royale with Woody Allen and Peter Sellers. Is it Peter Sellers? No, it's David Niven, isn't it?
I've never
Peter
seen
Sellers
it, so I don't
probably
know.
shot it. Any comedy in the 1960s had to either have Peter Sellers, David Niven, Woody Allen, or what's his name from Being There. Um, he's in
Peter Sellers.
Yeah, you know what I mean. I've only had half a glass of wine. Peter Sellers, David Niven, or Woody Allen had to show up, and Orson Welles would make a cameo. Mm.
He says while taking a sip of his nice wine.
It's not nice.
Jesus.
It's like, because I mean, I opened it last year, to be fair.
Oh wow.
It is really acidic, like really. But I'm tightening the bootstraps. I'm tightening the belt buckles. I'm not wasting any money, and this £8 bottle of wine is not getting wasted. I've got half a bottle left to crack through.
Oh, but it's a long night of recording, so there's gonna be.
It smells like paint thinner.
Oh,
You know nail varnish.
yes.
It smells like that. It tastes like exactly
well,
like nail varnish.
some people
I
get
think
high on that.
the bigger the gulp, the easier it'll go down because there's so much of it that at least I can taste a bit of fruit. I don't know. I could down that, right? No.
You're as desperate as you Sarian right now.
I'm in a real
It's just-
catch-22.
This is a real catch-22.
It's not.
Let's
to be
tweet at
honest, it's
Heller.
like,
It's like, oh well. It's
it's.
catch-22.
I've read the book and I've watched the film. No idea what a catch-22 is still, and I think that's for the best.
It is.
I think my brain would fall out my ears. It would just dribble out like a wet cake if I knew what it was. But no, I think it's that generation of writers, the sort of Kurt Vonnegut's, the Joseph Hellers. I never thought I'd enjoy. Not because I didn't want to, but I really wanted to. And I was so disappointed when I didn't enjoy Slaughterhouse-5. And I was miserable when I didn't like Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. And I was really scared to read Catch-22 because I'd heard such good things about it. And it's so good. It's just such an unbelievable creation. It's I've the more writing I do and the more reading I do and the more watching of films I do, the harder I find it to be inspired by stuff. I feel like inspiration comes from conversation now rather than
Yes.
consumption. Catch-22 is genuinely a bit inspiring for me. Not because anything really touched me or anything in particular with it. It was just this man has layered such a complex story and made it look so easy. I know it took 8 years to write, but he does not show it. You could, if you told me, oh, he wrote this in like 8 months with a storyboard, I'd probably believe it.
It was effortless, yeah.
Effortless, yeah. It's so snappy. It's so quick. It's so smart. And considering it took 8 years to write, the callbacks, the references, the foreshadowing, it's so promising and it shows such real risk as a writer. It's so good. And it's a shame that that's gone in the film, but there is no way you can adapt all of that into the film. And I think that's, he does the best he can with it.
It did. He really did. Not blaming poor Mike Nichols, especially since he didn't make as much money as wanted. Poor guy. Even though it was the 8th highest grossing film of the year, so it was still a successful film.
This is pre-Star Wars and Marvel. It was very easy to breach the top 10 when 9 films a year released.
MASH was way higher. MASH was much higher, and it came out like 3 months earlier.
MASH made what was it? I don't want to say it might have been triple or more than the profit that Catch-22 made. Let's have a look. Catch-22 made 24.9 million, and MASH made 81.6. MASH had a smaller budget as well.
Wow.
Blimey.
Oh, wow.
Just goes to show, just adapt MASH. That's what Alan Alda did. And look at him now. He's soaring.
Bless him. Anyway, Catch-22, 100% a recommendation from both of us. The novel, it's a must-own. Like, you have to have this in your own library. The film, it's worth watching at least once, I'd say.
I think, it's not something you need to revisit or something you'll get out more of on a future watch. I don't think I'd ever watch it again because my time is limited and my life is short and I don't have the time to spend rewatching Mike Nichols films.
I might rewatch it if I want to reread the novel, but I'm too lazy to actually do that.
yeah.
Which that happens sometimes. Like, but it's I can read another book.
Yeah.
It's like the film is 2 hours. You can waste 2 hours.
To be fair, I've in the past 3 years, I've only reread one book and I've read it 3 times now.
Is it Fear and Loathing?
Yeah, it's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I don't know. I like to keep hold of things. Like I kept my copy of Crime and Punishment under the subtext of I'm going to reread it. I'm not rereading that. Absolutely not. I was going to keep the Divine Comedy. It's like if I ever think about rereading that, I'll drop it on my head because it'll knock me unconscious or put some sense into me. But
That's how you're going to live the Divine Comedy.
I think with Catch-22, it's because it's so complex. You can always get something more out of that. You can always get something else.
Yeah. Amen to that. Anyway, before we leave, as always, Ewan, where can our audience find you on the web?
Oh well,
It's your
it's funny you
favorite
should
part.
say that. Actually, it was brought to my attention today that one of the articles I wrote was about a man that would ring the doorbell of a couple at Thursday, 2 a.m. every Thursday. And I made the mistake of making the social headline, "Police are on the lookout for a man that rings the doorbell at Thursday at 2 a.m." And every reply, and one of the quote tweets got like 15,000 likes, was, "I'm pretty sure I know when he's going to show up." And it's like, yeah, Thursday at 2 a.m, right, I get it now. I'm learning. It's early days for me as a journalist. But it's kind of good because it means it'll bump me up the social lists for the end of week roundup. So it'll look like I've
Nice.
done amazing stats. But that was for Daily Star. You can get me on there. You can see me on the front page. You can get me on Cult Following. You can get me on Clapper, Geek Show, Newcastle World. There's a few more, but who cares? You know, just Google my names. Usually, if I'll vanity search myself now. If I Google you,
See what happens.
Twitter, Cult Following, LinkedIn if you really want to, Daily Star, Newcastle World, and yeah, that'll do. You can get me on Letterboxd and Twitter at Ewan Gleadow, EWANGLEADOW, and I think that's everything. Yeah.
Nice. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Nicolò97, and there you can find me linktree/enjoy the movies for links to everything that I've done, my short films, the Death by Adaptation podcast, of course, all the various links. You can follow us on Death Adaptation on Twitter, Death by Adaptation on Instagram, and on TikTok as well, because we're on TikTok, putting them reels up there as well. And people seem to like them, like the 2 people that watch some of them or the 400 people that watch others. I don't know how that algorithm works, but anyway. And I'd also be sure to check out the sister podcast at this point of Death by Adaptation, which is the Uncut Gems podcast. We've name dropped it a couple of times. I've become the co-host there, and it's fun. Every week it's just so fun to be there. And last month we talked about the Invisible Man and Hollow Man, so be sure to check that out. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time, where we'll be talking about a more contemporary classic, Inherent Vice. So stay tuned for...
I had a mini heart attack. I thought you were going to say 50 Shades of Grey. It's like, no, we've done that.
No, we're not going back. Once is more than enough. No. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. We hope to see you soon, and we hope you have a fabulous day. Bye-bye.